Hello, and welcome to the Limitless Ladies Network, where our mission is to help women build holistic, empathetic self-care. Today's episode is sponsored by Seroptimus International of Willimantic. The name Seroptimus means best for women. Seroptimus International's mission is to help women and girls live their lives and live their dreams. Seroptimus is a global volunteer organization that provides women and girls access to the education and training that they need to achieve economic empowerment. This year, our Willimantic Club celebrates 59, actually almost going into 60 years of helping women. The two main projects that we support are the Live Your Dream Award, a cash award of up to $1,200 for women seeking to improve their economic situation through educational and training access, and the Dream Grant program is also funded for licensing and fees for women to continue their education. So we're always looking for women to join our mission. I'm part of a Seroptimus. I'm actually on the board of directors and love the group. They've inspired me to do what it is that I'm doing today. And if you're interested in joining the group or the national, because it is an international organization, I will post in the chat about that organization. You can go to seroptimuswillimantic.org to learn more about them. And then our usual disclaimer, before we get started, please note that this content is provided for general informational purposes only. It's not advice nor intended to be a substitute for professional, medical, or legal advice. This information is to be used at your own discretion. Those seeking any legal advice or treatment for anything or seeking a therapist should definitely seek out those qualified professionals. We make no representations, no warranties, or assume any liability for the content herein. So I am honored to have you back again today, Detective Alison Sullivan, retired detective, who's been going to share some tips with us about controlling situations and dealing with any potential partner situations that we may run into. Alison has been a retired detective for how long now?
I retired 3 years ago.
3 years. Good for
Yep.
you. And the parent of two teenagers. She served with the Wethersfield Police Department for 20 years before retiring. So welcome, Alison. I'm excited to have you back.
Thank you. And thank you for having me.
Yeah.
Appreciate that intro. Um, I wanted to say hello to Maria. Uh,
Yes. Welcome to the audience.
Hello.
So we're super excited to have you here to talk about the information today just on protecting ourselves as well as any of our young folks that we have out there, like our daughters, my nieces, anyone that might actually be going out and about these days, because I've been hearing a lot of horror stories of things, date rape and other things, and interactions at the supermarket, which is kind of nuts. So just wanted to get some feedback from you on what you think would reduce the prevalence of any like date rape situations in this country.
okay. Well, I think as a culture, we've done really well with getting help for victims of sexual harm. Counseling services, therapy, resources, that's become much more mainstream. And even, 50 years ago, we didn't have something like SANE nurses at hospitals to accompany sex assault victims.
Mm.
So we've made a lot of progress, I feel like, in terms of how we treat victims and how we care for them. But what I think would really change this whole crisis would be taking the emphasis and the focus from what victims can do to prevent themselves from being attacked to focusing on perpetrator behavior and making that normative. So rather than that being a taboo conversation, I think that it should become something that's normalized. And here's the analogy that I would use. So some of my responsibilities as a detective included monitoring the registered sex offenders in my jurisdiction. So I did learn a lot about predator behavior. Also, I worked with firearms. So I did all of our pistol permit background investigations. I did all of our firearms seizures. So if someone became ineligible to possess firearms, let's say as the result of a criminal arrest, it was my responsibility to get a plan in place and a strategy for approaching that residence and that owner and taking their guns, which that's a high risk operation, right?
Yes.
So one of the things I learned from many, many, many firearm seizures was just how much tactically has to go into a safe approach uh, tactically to take those firearms. But how does that apply to sexual assault or sexual harm? That's what I want to explain. When you think tactically, like I do as a retired detective, about, okay, if there's a threat or a problem, how would we go about as a police agency addressing that problem? I'll tell you what we wouldn't do. If there was someone on a street corner with a high-powered rifle, we wouldn't leave them with that, and they were threatening to use it or actually firing it, right? We
Right.
wouldn't leave them with the rifle and then direct all the other traffic around their area to move around them, and then give people tips about how to safely walk that neighborhood away from them. And we certainly would not be modifying everyone else's behavior and leaving the threat,
Right.
right? But so much of the conversation is about just that.
Yep.
So addressing the threat directly, um, and normalizing that is appropriate. It is appropriate. Men aren't the exclusive perpetrators of sexual harm, but they are, in the vast majority of perpetrators are male. And so addressing those behaviors head on,
Mhm.
and making that normative, I think is a that's where we need to go.
Agreed.
Yeah.
So do you think that the use of protection other than firearms, right? Because not every woman can carry a firearm, or wants to carry a firearm, right? Because they just may not feel safe with that.
Yeah,
What
there's
do
a
you
lot of liability with carrying a firearm, so that's not.
Nowadays, there certainly is. And
Yeah,
I have a license. But
yeah.
yep, it can also be a little intimidating to know that you have something that could kill somebody that you're
Mhm.
carrying around, right? Because of that, and scary with the liability. So I know there's other devices, right? Like pepper spray or mace that can potentially be effective as well for sexual assaults. So what do you think of using those types of devices?
I think that they're well intentioned. I like the idea of equipping people and giving them more options on their tool belt for defending and protecting themselves. But I can tell you from experience that those are not realistic options for several reasons. So I'll give you some examples. As a police officer, we were required to participate in some grueling, at times, defensive tactics training routinely. Routinely required to train with our mace, OC spray, tasers, firearms. Um, when things hit the fan in a really bad way, in an incident that spikes, quickly elevates your adrenaline, those types of actions that you might learn, let's say in a defensive tactics, let's say you took a self-defense class 2 years ago. Unless that's something you're training in on a daily, weekly basis, your body and mind's ability to retain that and then put that into practice in the moment that you may be being not even necessarily physically attacked on a street, but in a bad situation in an apartment with someone that you're interested in, but they're taking it way too far, too fast in
Yep.
a way that you don't care for. When your adrenaline skyrockets, those those classes, for example, defensive tactics, or how to take out a little container of mace that's probably crusted over in the bottom of your purse and hasn't been used in
Yeah.
since you bought it, the likelihood of you being able to execute on those things is minuscule. And so they concern me, products like that, because I feel like for some people I know personally, it gives them a false sense of security. So an example would be if someone got really, really drunk at a good friend's party and they decide they're going to take an Uber home by themselves. They're not worried about it because they have pepper spray in their purse.
Yep.
Things that might put them at risk, uh, but they have that what they believe is this fail safe. I have pepper spray with me. That's a concern to me, if it makes sense what I'm saying.
It does. And I actually have been taking it's Krav Maga. So it's basically self-defense, kickboxing slash self-defense. But I love doing it and I actually do it. We do it as a family for the most part. And I do it with my daughter. So we partner up a lot. And what you're saying makes sense because we go through cycles and they teach us just a certain set of techniques for about 3 months, right? And it progressively, they show you the technique and then it gets faster and faster so that it becomes repetitive is the thought, right? But you have to do it enough. We've been doing it for a year and I still don't know if I was in a situation if I would act quickly even though I've learned all these things, and even in class sometimes, if I don't do it regularly enough, and we go a few times a week, but it's not every day that we're practicing. So to that point, right, when you get in that situation, as much as you think that Mother Nature or whatever you want to call it, your instincts might just say, okay, you're gonna either flee or you're gonna freeze, or it's that fight or flight, right? Are you going to actually be able to have that aggression built up or whatever you want to call it that's going to get you through and be able to defend yourself what you were taught and have it recall enough? Or are you just going to freeze? And
Mhm.
sometimes in class, I will freeze because I'm like, oh yeah, what is it I'm supposed to be doing, even though I'm in the middle of somebody potentially attacking me, you
Yeah,
know?
yeah. I would say, unlike pepper spray or mace, one of the benefits I do see with self-defense classes, if people take them regularly,
Yes.
is the impact on your self-confidence. So, and that's not just a feeling or an idea. There are studies that document and show people are less likely to become targets of crime depending on how they carry themselves. So, an example would be something that we learned about and talked about in law enforcement. Every year the FBI does an analysis of in line of duty deaths of police officers. And they actually go back and contact the perpetrators and say, why did you choose this officer? And when you look at the numbers, it isn't just the smallest or all the female officers that are killed in the line of duty. Not at all.
Yep.
That's not. But one of the common themes they found when they interview these perpetrators of police homicides is that they can articulate that the officer seemed not very well put together, not self-confident, kind of sloppy, disorganized,
Mhm.
and and it's incredible that those factors actually, even though that person is in uniform and armed,
Yeah.
that change the perception on the part of the assailant in a really statistically significant way. So
Yeah, they saw them as a serious target. It makes total sense. And I can attest to that because doing it with my daughter, like both her and I, low self-esteem, low self-confidence, just from different situations, right? But since the start of doing that class a year ago, even within 6 months, I'd say, of doing that class with her, I could see, and other people in the class, because we see most people over and over again throughout doing each of our sessions, right? They
yeah,
could see the changes in her. Like when she started, she was all like hunched over, didn't want to talk. And then all of a sudden, like she's talking to strangers and high-fiving them and like just standing up proud. And she's like doing really well with a lot of not just the tactical stuff, but also the exercise and the strength. So it definitely makes a big difference
yeah,
in
that's great.
repetitive competitiveness, yeah, or
Yeah, that's excellent.
consistency, yeah.
Yeah. Incidentally, just one or two other things to add about devices like mace or pepper spray. People often purchase those items. They've never practiced with them or used them, and so they don't actually know the proper, and there's all different methods. Some have a stream, some have a spray.
Yep.
Um, so it's not as simple as you might think when you purchase something like that and carry it to actually use it effectively.
Right.
Additionally, if you have conditions like asthma, using a product like that can be absolutely disabling for you, because you can plan on it. And I was in this many times on the job. When someone uses pepper spray, OC spray, mace, whatever term you want to use, you will be getting some of it and feeling some of it. And if you have a condition like asthma, that's really risky. So,
Yeah. It's definitely a good warning to put out there to people that buy those things thinking that they're going to be able to have that protection, and it's not really protective, right? It can almost
right.
be a hindrance. It puts them in false protection.
Yeah.
Yeah, agreed. So on the side of being able to be a little bit preventive, I guess, do you have any suggested strategies that someone can take for basically claiming their boundaries when they're going out?
Yep. I think that to contrast what we just talked about, the vast majority of sexual assaults are not committed by strangers where you're physically having to defend yourself in a physical violent manner. They don't happen that way. So the majority of sexual harm events are going to occur. They're not going to be uh, violent in the traditional sense of the word. So they're situational, they're relational. Some of them involve a lot of nonverbal cues and communications, but generally speaking, what I would say is to start that to prevent date rape, to prevent sexual assault, really the conversation is for the predators. So predator behavior needs to change, full stop. And that's where the focus needs to be on. If we're going to address potential victims and how they might better protect or equip themselves, what I would say is two factors that were consistent in my investigations and in the investigations I saw in my agency are when you don't know someone and there is alcohol and or drugs involved. So, and I don't mean that in a salacious way. I just mean having a couple drinks. You know, I was at a business dinner last night. I had a great glass of cab. When you have the interplay of drugs and or alcohol, and you're talking about relating to someone that you do not know at all, I would say that is, think of that as a high risk situation. So I'm not saying hide in your house and don't go on a date,
Right.
but think of it as high risk and act accordingly. So some suggestions I would make very plainly would be meet in a public place. Do not get in that person's car. Do
Mhm.
not invite that person back to your apartment or house. Do not go to their place if you don't know them and there are drugs or alcohol being used. It's that
Right.
combination that really is, I mean, I don't want to say one for one, but such a high percentage of incidents happen with those two factors together. And there are several reasons for that, but to try to briefly explain in the time that we have right now, we're given, we have so many gifts, we have so many natural tools: hearing, sight, smell, our mind, our senses, and those are impacted by drugs or alcohol,
Right.
which is just the reason why you would caution people to not get buzzed and drive a vehicle, right? Because you need judgment, you need to make quick decisions, you need to be able to take in cues when you're driving, and that's impaired by. So it really does impair a bit our ability to see and detect potential red flags, warning signs, subtle, nuanced, problematic cues that you might not see otherwise. So for me personally, and I'm single and on the dating scene, I meet in a public place. I'm not having more than one drink. I'm definitely not using any drugs.
Yep.
And I am getting myself to that date and getting myself home. I'm not, so being very cautious with
Yeah.
those initial interactions, particularly when you don't know someone. But to be fair, you could do all the right things and make
And
all the right
still,
decisions, and things could still go poorly. We're just talking about reducing the likelihood of something like that happening.
right. And I think that the alcohol and drugs makes total sense. And the impairment that it hinders on your own intuition, like follow your intuition and your gut is definitely one way to determine and kind of use that as your meter, right? Or the hairs up on the back of your neck when you meet somebody or they say something and it just throws you off, right? Like you should really pay attention to those things.
Yeah, and I'll say I found in my personal experience, and I've talked to many women who resonate with this. It's really evident, I think, what I said about the first date, right? First time you're meeting someone, you're
Mm.
meeting in a public place. Uh, I get a little bit of pushback I've had with men uh, when it's the second or third date, and I do not want them to pick me up, and I do not want to go back to their place. So there's that uncomfortable area where I'm taking extra measures to maintain my boundaries
Yeah.
and set limits that sometimes people think is a little bit either too conservative
Right.
or extreme. And guess what? I don't care. Uh, and and that's where I think it gets tough for people, when you're starting to make decisions that maybe are a little bit outside of what's considered the norm socially in the dating world. But I've
Agreed,
just
because I don't think there's a lot of conservativeness when it comes to dating, especially online dating, right?
right, right.
So that kind of brings me into another question about online dating or interactions with people that might be older, because I know online dating is a big thing right now, because it's great that people meet each other at networking functions or somebody introduces you to somebody else, but it seems like that's pretty old school these days, right? And a lot of people are just going on. I'm sure there's a million when I was dating. There wasn't that many, but a lot of online dating apps, right? So how do like older women that may have got thrust into this dating scene because they recently got divorced and they weren't expecting it? Like how do they handle protecting themselves in that way?
I would suggest just being really cautious. The internet and internet-based dating is amazing in the sense that, you might not want to go hang out at a bar. That might not be your scene.
Yeah,
And people in their 50s or 60s of the quality and caliber that you want to meet might not be in bars, right?
right.
So it certainly gives you access, a much broader access. But I will say, and this applies to not just being safe on dating apps, but broadly speaking, what I saw in my law enforcement career was that the internet, it's just think of it as rather than locking your door at night before you go to sleep, it really leaves it wide open.
Mm.
It gives people access to you digitally that you otherwise would have no connection with. And one of the risks is there are some, I'm not saying everybody's a creep, I'm not even saying most people, but there is an element of dishonest, predatory people who take advantage. They want to take advantage of someone either sexually, they want to take advantage of them financially.
Mm.
So I would just use a lot of caution, particularly if you're new to the dating scene, newly in your 40s, 50s, 60s, and you are not familiar with dating apps. You really should talk to some people who've had some experience with them, and just know that some of those profiles are 100% fake. They're not even real.
Yeah,
Be very
like
cautious.
some of them might be ones that are like I noticed a couple just even with business stuff, right? Like someone tries to friend you or something, and then you look at them and you see that they have five pictures and they don't really have a lot of friends. It's like
Yeah,
that's probably some type of scam. Stay away.
yeah, yeah. There's
Don't
plenty of
friend that
scam
person.
profiles. Plenty of who, but I'll tell you what, some of those scam profiles could, because I've had people share with me some of the communications, they can be very charming
Oh
via
yeah.
text and very good at communicating and reeling people in. So uh,
Yeah.
I would say be particularly careful if your heart is in a place where man, you're just in that situation where you're feeling desperate for company, desperate to quickly get back into a relationship, that really puts you at a greater risk because you just really badly want something, a relationship again, and you might be tempted to or not even see some of these signs.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah.
So back to some of the preventative things when you are going out. So I did run across a couple of gadgets when I was just looking up some things on prevention and tools that you could possibly use. And some things that I found were like it's called the nightcap kind of cover that you put on. It's like a scrunchie and you pull it out and put it over the top of your drink so that you don't get roofied, right? Because that's a big deal. Like I know somebody that went to the casino, went out with her friends, all of a sudden wasn't feeling good. And then, someone walked her to her car. Before you know it, she woke up hanging out like through her door with her pants down in the middle of the garage.
Wow.
So, like, are there any of those little gadgets that might be safe to use or that you would recommend?
That reminds me of the challenges of exercising regularly. If you join a great gym but it's 20 minutes away in traffic, like what is the likelihood of you actually using that gym, even though it might be good for you to use it?
Yep.
If it's difficult to routinely use in a practical way, it's probably not going to get used. So I
Yep.
think that's a great, I mean, that sounds ingenious, but I'm wondering about the likelihood of someone
Using it.
practically using that on a regular basis.
Yeah, I would
I
be
would be
curious
cautious
too.
about where you drink,
Right?
um, for sure. And I would be cautious about who you're drinking with. Um,
Yeah.
if you're going to a place where you feel like you actually need to physically guard the beverage that you have, I guess my first thought is that really a great place for you
Nice
to
to be.
be?
Yeah,
But that does sound like a pretty cool invention.
it does.
Yeah.
Who knows? Scrunchy turned into cover.
Yeah.
Could be fantastic. I don't
It,
know.
it might be more practical in settings. Maybe I'm
Just
thinking like
cover it with your hand.
college sorority or fraternity parties where you are getting
Yeah.
cheap beer, and you don't have professional bartenders pouring. You
Yeah,
have
that's
other
kind of what
college.
I'm thinking. Like the sorority scene, I could almost see
Um,
that being as like a cool thing to like and cover your drink because God knows, like just everybody is hanging out and drinking kegs, doing funnels, and it brings
yeah,
back some bad memories. So
you could be a weirdo like me and just not get drunk at a college party ever.
yeah,
It's an
it's worth it
option.
not
It's
to
an
get
option.
drunk. It is worth it.
Yeah.
Well, this
So
was awesome. I appreciate you taking the time with us again today to go over some of these great strategies and tactics to help keep the ladies in our community safe.
thank you. If I could just say, if you want to check out my website, it's at protectus.solutions. My company is called Protect Us, and I offer public speaking engagements on topics like the prevention of sexual harm, also sexual bullying. But I do things like talking to seniors about how not to be scammed. I talk about how to drive safely in an age where it's terrifying just to travel on a highway at this point because of the aggressive driving out there. So
Yeah.
protectus.solutions is my website if anyone wants to check it out.
And I just posted it in the chat as well.
Thank
And
you.
I want to give a special thank you to our sponsor, Seroptimus International Wilmantic. And I highly encourage you to join this worthwhile organization because you get to hang out with me and some other great ladies as we help to empower the ladies and girls of our community. I posted that link out there for Seroptimus as well, so anyone can join in. And please check out the Limitless Ladies Network website again, where we're going to post a video from today. We're also going to kind of throw up some edits and updates for any workshops that are coming up for like at the end of the month. I have something coming up for a vision boarding workshop, which should be a lot of fun. And then next month, I'm planning on doing another webinar with someone, a naturopath, to talk about menopause and hormone replacement therapy. So register for that. And then follow us, of course, on social media, Facebook, LinkedIn. I think we're both out there, so definitely look us
Yep.
up. And hopefully we can connect with you and see you all again. Thanks for joining us today.
All right. Thank you.
Thanks.